Welcome to the 1923 Book Club. Every Monday here on YouTube I will release a new video, and the video will be of me speed reading a book, memorizing the key points, and then telling you what I learned. This week from Bangkok, Thailand, I will speed read The Art of Money Getting by P.T. Barnum, then I will memorize the key points and tell you what I learned. If you would like to join our 1923 book club, it is totally free. Just click the link down below, join our club, and you will get a free copy of this book, The Art of Money Getting, as well as every book that we read. And you'll also get an audio copy where you can listen to the book. So here is this week's book, The Art of Money Getting by P.T. Barnum. Hey guys, so I'm in Bangkok, Thailand right now on a boat going through the city, and my book of the day is P.T. Barnum's book, The Art of Money Getting. I'm going to read it on my Kindle iPhone as I go through the river today in Bangkok.
King of Food ไทยนะ
The temple over there. Thank you. Thank you. Well, guys, I did it. I read P.T. Barnum's book, The Art of Money Getting. Bye-bye. See you guys later. Thank you. And now I'm going to go memorize it and create a video telling you what I learned. See you later, man. Interesting development. I get back to my hotel, I'm finish up memorizing and reading the book, and I talk to the guy downstairs of the temple that we saw in the distance, and he's like, oh hey, yeah, you can actually go and get out and go in the temple and see all these statues and stuff, and I can't go wearing this shirt right here. I'm not dressed fancy enough. He said I got to wear a collared shirt to go in the temple, so I am actually going to do the video where I tell you what I learned from that location. So walking the streets right now, and I'm seeing all these businesses on the side of the road. They're selling wallets or necklaces or food or shops over here. And I can't help but think as I'm reading this book by P.T. Barnum, The Art of Money Getting, that just as he wrote this book in 1880 and the business principles are the same in America in 1880 as they were in 2017, I gotta think the business principles are the same all over the world and here in Thailand. So I love walking down the street and seeing all this business and commerce and money getting. Change clothes. Huge P.T. Barnum fan. Is it me or does he look a little sassy? Alright guys, here we go. I'm just going to dive in. So, P.T. Barnum. I've been thinking about this book. I read it today as I went on the boat ride, and then as I walked around this awesome palace, and I thought about the business principles seen here, the business principles of the right location, of advertising. So this book, P.T. Barnum, I gotta be honest with you, I just loved it, where his personality came through. He's a funny guy, he's a smart guy, he's a hard worker, he was. P.T. Barnum, the greatest show on earth. It was published in 1880, and it just starts off by saying America is just a great country with the land of opportunity, and he makes a bold statement right at the beginning. He says, if independence is what you desire, then just set your mind to it and use the right tools, and it's easy to get. And I think by independence, he's meaning financial independence. And I'm like, whoa, easy? It's easy to get. It's easy to be wealthy. It's easy to have financial independence. And that's the claim he makes, like right off the bat, grabs your attention. In the next statement, he says, the road to wealth is as clear as the road to the mill. In other words, the road to the mill, which, remember, this is 1880, so, the mill is the shop where they get their work done. That road is clear. He's saying the road to wealth is just as clear. And then he makes an example. He said, let's imagine, and he uses the example of pounds, British pounds. He said, let's imagine you have an annual salary of 20 pounds, but your annual expenses are 20 pounds, 6 pence. Well, you're going to be miserable. But if your annual salary is 20 pounds and your annual expenses are 19 pounds, 6 pence, you're going to be happy. So he's saying people just spend too much money. They don't understand economy. And then he said, people always say, oh, I understand economy, but I don't understand why my neighbor's getting richer than I am. I'm just as smart as he is, and I'm just as hard as a worker he is. And then P.T. Barnum comes back and said, it's because you don't understand economy. And then the next point he makes is just so good. It's just nugget by nugget by nugget in this book. He says people will save on the stupid stuff. And he uses the example of a woman who at night they'll light only one candle, and because they don't want to light 2 candles, they want to save money. And at the end of the year, they've saved a little bit of money. And because they save a little bit of money here, in general, people feel like it gives them a right to go crazy and spend stupid money other places. And he'll say, this woman, they only burn 1 candle a night instead of 2, and so with that little bit of money she saves, she feels good about that she's saving money, and she feels good she's frugal, so she goes out and spends $20 or $30 worth of ribbons that she doesn't need. He uses another example of the woman lights the candle at the end of the night, and a visitor comes by and he wants to read at the end of the night, and she says, I'm sorry, we don't have enough light to read because we only use 1 candle at night. And P.T. Barnum makes the statement, she thinks she's so smart by saving that little bit of money a year, but by lighting 2 candles and having enough light to read, what you read would make you twice as much money as you save. In other words, knowledge is power. What you learn would make you twice as much money. And he goes on to say businesses do this all the time. They'll save envelopes, or they'll save paper, or they'll use the very last bit of paper, and they're penny wise but dollar foolish, right? They'll save all here, and they feel like they're being frugal, so that gives them the right to have expensive parties, or worst of all, he said waste money on parties, but then he said waste money on time. Waste time. And then I liked it because he said, or go buy fancy carriages, which today, that's go buy fancy cars. You see all the people in social media or whatever in front of their Lamborghinis, in front of their airplanes or whatever like that. And back then it was the same thing. People haven't changed. People haven't changed. In the last 140 years, they haven't changed. And in the history of time, in the history of humanity, people haven't changed. People want to go buy fancy stuff, and that they really can't afford. And that's a point that he makes in this book. He says true understanding economy is simple. Your income is greater than your expenses. That's it. He said, wear your clothes a little bit longer. He said, eat plainer foods. He said, if your income is less than your expenses at the end of the year, and you made no money, made no profit, he said, do this. Get out a journal, and every time you spend something, put 3 columns. Necessities, comfort, and luxuries. He said, you will be shocked at how much is in the luxury column and how much you can eliminate. He said, if the entire world was blind, I would have no need for fine furniture. In other words, he's saying, I'm buying, we humans will buy all this fine furniture, these fancy carriages or fancy cars to impress other people. But if the entire world was blind, we would have no need for that, or at least P.T. Barnum would have no need for fine furniture. I thought that was such a cool, great point. He says that sometimes a poor man will say, you know, that rich man thinks he's better than me, or just humans, that person thinks they're better than me. I'm gonna go buy a fancy car, I'm gonna buy a fancy house, or in his case, he said, I'm gonna go buy a nice carriage and a horse, and I'm gonna take that horse and carriage down the street so he can see me and know that he's not better than me. And then the poor man realizes, oh, I can't buy a horse and carriage, so I'm gonna go rent a horse and carriage and drive that down the street so he can see me. And it was like, whoa, this is 1880, he wrote this book. How many of these YouTube or social media celebrities or whatever that you see, they're renting cars and they're renting airplanes and they're renting boats and they're posing in front of them in these crazy pictures in these houses or whatever to show you that you're not better than them, or that maybe they're, you know, to impress you or whatever. Humanity hasn't changed. He was writing about this in 1880, except the analogy he said is, I'm gonna go rent a horse and a nice carriage. He says, if envy and vanity are your motivations, you will not get ahead. He said, man keeps himself poor. He says a cold bath and a brisk walk are just as exhilarating as a ride in a nice carriage and a social chat. But those cost more money. A cold bath and a brisk walk are free. But he said, just spending time with your family is more exhilarating and more rewarding than expensive parties. One of his friends said, man, that sofa cost me $30,000. His wife had to have this fancy sofa. And then when she bought the fancy sofa, because, you know, she wanted all her friends to see it, then she puts it in her house and realizes, well, my furniture needs to go with that. It's out of place. So then they bought all this nice furniture. And then all that nice furniture was too big, so then they needed a bigger house. He said, that sofa cost me $30,000. If the entire world was blind, I wouldn't need fine furniture. That's a P.T. Barnum quote, and I love it. That's his personality that's coming out in this book. He says that health is the foundation for a successful life. Adults will look at other adults and want to spend more to impress them. He says that young boys will look at men and say, man, you know, when I chew tobacco, if I could just chew tobacco like him, I would be a man like him. And so those little boys put that tobacco in their mouth and they hate the taste and they spit it out and they hate it. They put it in again, they try it the next time, and it's terrible. But eventually, they acquire this taste for tobacco that's harmful and terrible for them, and they had to acquire the taste for it, but it's ruining their health. But it was all at the root of what being cool or what other people would think. He said a smart businessman can't overindulge in alcohol. He said you got to have a clear head. You got to be able to know that 2 + 2 is 4. He said when you're overindulging in alcohol, you make bad decisions, you make foolish decisions, you pass up opportunities, your head is not clear, and you can't be a good businessman. And that was the introduction to this book, The Art of Money Getting. Then he goes on from here and he lists off 20 points. Number 1, select the right vocation. He said your parents can't select your vocation. He can't say you're going to be a doctor. You got to find what you're good at. And he says, you know, I'm not good at mechanical things. If I had been assigned that in life, I wouldn't have been very successful. I had to find something that fit me. His second point was find the right location. He said if you could run a great hotel and great service, but you set up that hotel in a small village, you'd go out of business. He said in 1858, he was in London and he sees this, come on inside for this great show. And that's the business he was in. You know, he was in show business, the greatest show on earth. So he told his friend, he said, hey, let's go in. It's only a penny. So they go in and this show, and there's this guy up there and he's talking about the bearded ladies and armadillos and albinos. And he's like building it all up. This is going to be great. And then the big reveal, and he shows these wax statues, and P.T. Barnum says they were just terrible. They were poor quality. And P.T. Barnum confronted the man. He's like, man, these statues are really terrible quality. This is not Madame Tussauds here. The guy was a showman. He's like, man, because Madame Tussauds, those are delicate wax, perfectly constructed. These are actually the real people. And he said, look, you're telling me that over there is Henry VIII. Everybody knows Henry VIII. Everybody. He's a big guy. Your guy's a lean, thin guy. And then the showman replied, well, you would be too if you've been standing there that long. P.T. Barnum returned the next day and he's like, man, you're a great showman, but you got the wrong location. Your location is all bad. Come to the United States. So he came to the United States. He worked for P.T. Barnum in New York and in New Orleans, putting on his show. And he said, P.T. Barnum said the guy's now worth $60,000, which, you know, this was in 1880. The next point number 3, he says, stay out of debt. He said, debt robs a man of his self-respect and it makes him despise himself. Debt will make a man grovel and work so hard and toil, and he is working for things, for food that's already eaten and goods that are already worn out, and he has nothing to show for it, and he's working so hard. Now, when he says stay out of debt, he makes a clear point. He said, I'm not talking about the business who borrows money to invest in inventory and sell it right away for a profit. He said that's good. He tells the story of a Quaker. The Quaker said to this man named John, he said, John, do not get trusted for anything. In other words, don't take a loan for anything. Don't get trusted for anything. But if you do get trusted for manure, because you can get your money back. In other words, if you're going to take a loan, have somebody give you a bunch of manure, and because you can sell it and get your money back. He said a creditor will go to bed at night and wake up richer than they were when they went to sleep because their money, that interest, was accruing overnight. The person who borrows the money, they go to sleep at night and they wake up poorer than they were when they went to sleep. The Puritans, they're so religious and we're not going to work on Sunday. Their money will even work for them on Sundays. The next one that he talks about was perseverance, and he uses a quote from Davy Crockett. This thing remember, when I am dead, be sure, and then go ahead. And I'm like, what does that mean? And it was Davy Crockett was saying, when I am dead, first of all, make sure I'm dead. But after you're sure I'm dead, carry on, persevere, go ahead. P.T. Barnum says perseverance is another word for self-reliance. And perseverance is it's an attitude. It's just moving ahead in difficult circumstances. The next point he says, whatever you do, do it with all your might. He says, you know, you get one business person and they create a fortune because they're putting everything they have into their business. They're doing it with all their might. And then you have the other business person, same business, but he is in poverty because he's doing it half-heartedly. He gives a great example. This is 1880, but it's the same conversations we're having today and the same ones. He gives a conversation of a rich man and a poor man. He says vagabond. And he says, the vagabond says to the rich man, you know what? I read that there's enough money in the world for everybody. And if we just equally divide it, then we'll all have enough. And then the rich man replied, but if we all spend the money and do with our money the way you do, we will all be broke. Then what? And the vagabond replies, then we'll divide it again. He said, some will say, I'm going to let my camel loose at night and just trust God that everything will be okay. And P.T. Barnum says, no, tie up your camel and then go to sleep and trust God. He said, do all you can. Work as hard as you can and then trust providence or luck or whatever you want to call it. And those were his words. He said, be cautious and be bold. He said, be both. They're not mutually exclusive. You got to be cautious when it's right to be cautious and be bold when it's time to act. If you're always bold, you might make a little bit of money, but your boldness continues and there's no caution in it, and then you go broke. Be cautious and be bold. The next point was use the best tools. Brains and experience are the best tools. And he says when your employees get more experience, they're going to become more valuable to you. Pay them a fair increase in their wages. He said if they get too crazy and they ask for too much of an increase, let them go. But he said the best tools are brains and experience. Now this next one is don't get above your business. And I think what he was saying is don't get too good to work. In other words, don't be above it. Be in your business, be working, especially when you're first starting it out. And he gives the analogy of a young man. He's like, I'm going to start this business. And the guy's, how are you going to start it? Oh, I got this rich uncle that he's going to die and leave a bunch of money and I'll start the business. Or maybe I'll get a business loan from somebody and then I'll start the business. And P.T. Barnum's like, look, if somebody just gives you a loan and you didn't work and you didn't earn it, you're going to get that loan and you're going to go out of business because you don't understand the value of a dollar. You don't understand how to run a business. The best way to start a business is not your rich uncle dying. And then he makes a comment. He said, rich uncles have a bad habit of living a long time. That's not the best way to start a business. And if you do start it that way, you're going to be doomed for failure, is what he believes, or have a better chance at failure. He said, rich boys get poor and poor boys get rich. His next tip was learn something useful. He said, if you learn something useful, you will always have something to fall back on. His next tip was let hope predominate, but don't be too much of a visionary. He says being too much of a visionary makes a man poor, because the man who's too much of a visionary, he's like, oh man, that's a great idea, that's a great idea, that's a great idea, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna do that. Everything seems like a great idea. Everything he's got all these great visions because everything looks like success, and everything is never success. His next point was don't scatter your powers. And when he said this, he's like, look, just focus on one thing. Don't focus on a bunch of different things. He said, focus on that one business until you make it successful or until your experience tells you to abandon it. But focus on one thing. He says, when you focus on one thing, the brain will constantly start supplying you with improvements and tweaks to that one thing, what you can do. But if your powers are scattered, then your brain can't fully focus on that. It's not giving you all the updates or the improvements that you could be making because it's thinking on so many different things. Let it focus on one thing. His next point was be systematic, but don't be overly systematic. In other words, have systems in your business. It's the, Henry Ford proved that with the assembly line. But he's saying don't be too silly with that, because if you are, he gave the example of a waiter at a hotel, and the waiter said, it was the first day on the job, and his boss said, here, give them the soup, and then when they finish the soup, give them the next course. Well, the customer at the table, he didn't finish his soup, and he said, I want the next course. And the waiter was so systematic, he's like, no, you can only have the next course when you finish your soup. So obviously, be systematic, but not too systematic. His next point was read newspapers. He's like, look, you got to be aware of what's going on out there. There's so many innovations and new updates coming on. If you're not aware of them, you're going to get left behind. His next point was beware of outside operators. He says successful businessmen will squander fortunes when they begin speculating on businesses if they have no idea or no knowledge about them. He said a businessman who is successful in one area and starts speculating in another and investing going outside of his business where he made a success, he's like Samson. He's like the guy who got his hair cut off. He became weak. He became like other men. And you go outside of your business and begin speculating in other areas, you become weak because you don't have the knowledge and experience. Do not jeopardize your fortune on business investments where you have no experience. He says, don't endorse without security. In other words, don't give somebody a loan without getting some security that they're going to pay you back. This next one is so good. This next one is just so good. It's advertise your business. You got to advertise. You have to advertise. You got to spend money. Put newspaper ads out there. He said, people will read those newspaper ads when you're asleep. He said, or when you're awake and you're working hard in your business doing other things, people are reading your ads and you're making money. He's like, you got to advertise. And he said he had a conversation with a man, and the man said, oh no, newspaper advertising doesn't work. And P.T. Barnum was like, well, did you do it? He said, yeah, I put 3 ads in the newspaper and I spent $1.50. And the P.T. Barnum was like, he said, advertising is like learning. A little bit is dangerous. In other words, he's saying you can't just advertise a little bit and be successful. He said you got to advertise until everybody knows who you are and they know what you do. They got to know who your business is and what your business does. And you got to advertise until that happens. And if you stop advertising before that happens, you lose all the money that you spent in advertising. And he uses the example that we've heard, and this was 1880, and they were talking about it in 1880. He's talking about a French writer who talks about there are 7 points that a person has to hear your advertisement 7 times before they'll buy. I heard that this week, and he's writing about that 7 points in 1880. People are the same. These business principles don't change. Whether it's the business principles of spending money you don't have, spending money to impress people, buying fancy carriages, or buying fancy cars, or you gotta advertise 7 times. He tells 2 funny stories of 2 successful advertisements. He said he was walking by a shop and the sign said, don't read the other sign. Of course, what did everybody do? They read the other sign, which was the advertisement. He tells another story of there was a Jenny Lind, and I had to Google Jenny Lind. Who's Jenny Lind? Well, it was a famous opera singer. But he said they were selling tickets to this Jenny Lind opera, and somebody paid $250 for them, and they were like, whoa, who's this guy? He said, and the guy who bought the ticket, it was like an auction or something. He said, who do I say bought this ticket? And he said, say Jen and the Hatter bought it. Well, it was a guy who made hats. Jen and the Hatter, and people were like, The newspapers wrote about it. Somebody named Jen in the Hatter bought this Jenny Lind ticket, and everybody was like, "Who's Jen in the Hatter?" And it was a guy just starting out in the hat making business, and he said it was such a great advertisement for him. His next point was be nice to your customers. Be courteous to your customers. He tells the story of a customer, and the customer was disrespecting one of his employees, and the guy was like, when he comes out, I'm going to let that customer have it. He's like, why? He goes, he's disrespecting me. He's like, well, he's also paying your salary, so you don't do that. You're going to treat him courteously. And P.T. Barnum said something that I'm going to put in my head. He said, people don't like to pay and then be kicked. Point taken, P.T. Barnum. Thank you for that. That's going to be something that I need to get better at, customer service. He said, be charitable. He said, help those who help themselves. Don't just give money away, but be charitable. And he said, be quiet about it. And he said, don't be one of the people who says, oh, I'm going to pray for you. That's how I'm going to be charitable. He said, no, help them. He said, if you're trying to convert them to Christianity, you have a better chance if they have a full stomach. This next one is one that I've been guilty of. He says, don't blab. If you're having business success or you're making money, just shut up. You don't need to go tell everybody that what you're doing and how you're doing it. Just keep your mouth shut. Don't blab. He said, don't write letters. And if you have to write a letter, be careful the detail you're giving them. In other words, those letters are going to stay around. You're going to write something in a letter and it's going to be preserved and people can use it against you. Today, I think it's social media. I'm like, man, how many Facebook messages have I sent or emails have I sent that are out there permanently now, and I wish I could take them back. So don't blab. Next point he says is keep your integrity, and that's just being honest. Just being honest. Just do the right thing. And then he just kind of sums up his whole book by saying being the making money and being successful and this is a good thing. You're not bad. The rich aren't evil. And he makes a point where trade has flourished, science and art have made their best and greatest achievements. He says that when people make money, when businesses make money, they spend it and they make society better. And he said there are a few exceptions. He said there are some misers who will make money and they'll hoard it all from themselves. But he said that miser is eventually going to die, and then his money will be dispersed to society. He says, so it's good. Success is good. The art of money getting is good, but you do it the right ways. The art of money getting, he said, it's easy to make money. You just gotta the proper means. And his point was pick the right vocation, location, stay out of debt, persevere. Whatever you do, do it with all your might. Use the best tools. Don't be above your business. Learn something useful. Be hopeful, but not too much of a visionary. Don't scatter your powers. Be systematic. Read newspapers. Don't get outside of your business. Don't give security. Don't give loans without security. You got to advertise your business. Be nice to your customers. Be charitable. Don't blab and have integrity. You do those things, P.T. Barnum says it's easy to make money. The art of money getting. If you like this video, please give me a like, a thumbs up. Please share it. But more importantly, please click down below and subscribe. And also, you're going to want to enter your email address in the description. I give a PDF copy of this book away. So if you want a copy of this book, and you do, it's free. Just enter your email address down below. Like, subscribe, click the links down below. P.T. Barnum, great book. Okay guys, if you enjoyed that, click the link down below, join our book club. You will get a free copy of the book. You'll be in our club, and you'll get a free PDF, EPUB Kindle version of the book, and you can read it for yourself. You will love it. And also join our book club because you get audio copies of me reading the book. It's a great club to be in. See you on the next video. See you next Monday.